Hello, assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And here we are, smack in the middle of monsoon rains, storms, cloudbursts. Yes. I mean, normally in the subcontinent, we actually love the rainy season. That's the monsoon season. And we love the rains and all because the extreme humidity that we have to go through at least 1 month prior, which is what, if you've listened to my previous podcast, I was complaining a lot about. And apparently, I got my dates wrong because I thought monsoon should have started. But according to our gardener, the last month that we were all complaining about the heat and humidity and not a single drop of proper rain and this and that. According to him, that wasn't even the month of monsoon. The month of monsoon is now, which we can now actually see and appreciate, because as soon as the monsoon season began, we've had flash floods, we've had huge storms, we've had lots and lots of rain. But to be honest, for those of us who are not very directly badly affected, it's a relief. But we know that what can be a relief in some areas can be an absolute nightmare for other areas. Like, for example, as I said, cloudburst. Today, around and sometime in the morning, it was raining, and apparently it was raining not just in Lahore, but it was raining in Azad Kashmir and basically different parts of Pakistan throughout. And Azad Kashmir, as you know, is a mountainous region. It's in the north, up north. So basically, what happened is that the intense rain, it led to a cloudburst, which in turn led to a huge amount of damage, because in mountain areas especially, cloudbursts can be extremely damaging. It's not just the flash floods, but then you get damage to the infrastructure, you get damage to the buildings, you get damage to people's cars, so it's very dangerous, in other words. So having that phenomenon happen, and then at the same time having very proper heavy rains that actually are most welcomed in this part of Pakistan, which is this part of Lahore, where the humidity is unbearable if it wouldn't have rained the way it did. So I mean, that's one of the you can say setbacks of or dangers of having a rainy season, because other countries usually don't have a rainy season. But in countries like ours, like in the subcontinent and in Thailand and in, well, apparently even Korea suffers monsoon. I never knew that, to be honest, until in the recent years. I thought this was specific to the subcontinental region because, to be honest, Malaysia and all, yeah, Malaysia, Thailand, subcontinent. But anyway, that is also another reason why this time I think most of us confused our dates, because monsoon had started a month earlier, as in it started in the other countries before, a month before it started here. So that's another reason why we, I think, kind of confused our months. But according to our local native ethnic calendar, this is monsoon month. So we're on time, we're not late, although most of us thought we were late. Well, that's what happens when humidity and heat drives you crazy. You really, you tend to sort of wonder if everything else is going wrong. But anyway, point being, rain is a blessing and a curse. And I'll tell you why it can be a curse. I think it's mainly because of the lack of diligence or lack of honesty on the part of your government. Okay? Otherwise, rain is a blessing. Like, you see, the thing that really pees me off is, on the one side, we're complaining about how the water level of our underground natural water resource, on which we heavily have always depended on for eons, we're complaining that the water level is dying down, and yet look at the amount of rains we get. You see that? I mean, it's so oxymoronic, isn't it? The amount of rains that we get is enough to flood a whole city. In fact, if we didn't have the irrigation system, the canal system, if we didn't have all these rivers and going up to the sea, then we might as well have lost at least 4 cities who could have drowned and cease to exist. This is the amount of rainwater that gets wasted, in other words. Okay, this is the amount of water that at the end goes to the sea, right? And that obviously is, as they say, it is a posing danger for example, Karachi, which is a port city. So it's a city by the sea, it's a coastal city. And because the sea level rises because of the amount of rain that we get, especially during monsoons, every single time the sea level rises, then they say that the danger of Karachi suddenly, you know just getting way below sea level and getting drowned and probably ceasing to exist can become very imminent. So what I'm trying to say is that this was something that we talked, that if you remember, when Imran Khan was elected and everything, one of the major things that most of us talked about was using resources and storing natural resources, that would help actually keep your water levels high underground, and at the same time, it would help produce more electricity, and electricity could get so cheap it could be almost free. And if you remember, Imran Khan sort of started these mini hydel projects where he had these small hydel powerhouses to produce electricity, and different strategic points of different streams and riverbeds, especially up north, so they could get out actually free electricity. And that is what happens when you have an honest man working, because all these things that are so common sense to you, they're so simple and they don't even cost money. Utilize natural resources, right? Store rain. So we've always been thinking, I mean, this is something I've been thinking for years, is like, why the frack haven't we ever made rain collection units? Because this country is blessed with rain. We're blessed with water. We can use that water in so many ways, but no. The reason being that our governments have always been so corrupt, and even now the current government, which is obviously the same government that has come in different shapes and sizes throughout the last 4 decades, they and the army, they are so busy corrupting themselves and corrupting our land and stealing our land, and trying to sell us out to the highest bidder out there, which is usually America. So they're so busy basically raping this country, that they never bother to sit and think. And this is why these rains that are actually a blessing become a nightmare, and they become a curse. But actually they're a blessing. These are the rains that would have helped us through water shortages. I mean, right now they're talking about India, and you know what? India is obliged to open their floodgates every time it rains during the season. Otherwise, India would drown and everybody would die, and it's a fact. Okay, the amount of flooding that occurs in just these 2 months, the amount of flooding that occurs is enough to drown a whole country. This again is what I'm saying. This is the amount of water that we let go waste when it ultimately goes into the sea. So India cannot afford to keep its floodgates closed. I'm sorry. I mean, they have to open it, and then that water has to come into Pakistan, and then that has to fill our riverbeds all over again, and then it has to go once again go. So it doesn't matter how many dams India makes. It doesn't matter how many dams Pakistan has. At the end of the day, they will still have to save themselves by letting water flow, or else they will risk their own deaths. And we will still continue to let water waste, even though we actually would have no shortage of water. We would never even welcome the floodgates being opened by India, actually, if we maintained and utilized our own water resources, again the biggest of them being rain. So every time it rains, and every time the lightning cracks, a thunderbolt rumbles through, and then you have these loud bangs, and you think that, oh, you know what, this is really this is a miracle, and it's a curse. It's one of the most beautiful things to see and to hear, but also the most terrifying things, because you understand the scientific logic behind it. The electrons, the lightning, the sound, or whatever. You understand the whole science of it. But at the same time, you also understand that there is a divine being behind it all, and that he is sending you different spiritual messages through all these things. So basically, when he's sending you rain, he's telling you this can be a blessing if you want to, but at the same time, this can be my one of my biggest curses upon you for acting the way you are, for being as corrupt as you are. And it is a fact, because God has told us time and again in the Quran, in the Bible, in the Torah. He's told us again and again that he has used natural disasters and catastrophes to punish mankind whenever mankind goes so astray that he completely forgets his sense of humanity. And that is exactly where the world has been standing for at least the last 2 decades. And that's a fact. Okay, when you look at Israel and America and the UK and Germany and France, and when you look at the way they are acting up, and then when you look at the way the people that they have hired, the mercenaries that they've hired, and plumped into our countries as alleged politicians and government bodies, and when you see what they're up to and what they're doing, then yes, every single drop of rain that will fall will be translated as a curse. Again, it's not just a curse as a punishment for where we are, how astray we've gone, what we're doing with our lives, of the lack of faith that we have, because it is ultimately that. It is ultimately the lack of faith that makes people such monstrous beings that they can do the things that they do. I think if you remember death every day, if you even just for a second remember the fact that you're soon going to be 6 feet under, I think the goosebumps and the chills that you'll get, just from the thought of it, would literally stop you dead on your tracks. But no, people don't remember their death. Even when people see death in front of their own eyes, they act as if they have nothing to do with it. They act as if death will never touch them. They act as if they will never die, as if this world of theirs will never collapse. When every single thing around us actually reminds us of how fragile we are, how vulnerable we are, and how pathetic we are, how small we are. The fact that when you explore space and when you explore universes and you find out that there might be, an ancient universe, and then you find out that, oh, well, maybe this is a parallel dimension, or you find, and anything and everything that you try, when you see a veil and you think, oh, that's maybe a veil between the two edges of the two universes, and then it strikes you as all, again, you're forced to turn back to the existence of God. Like it or not, actually in the past, the whole point of science, and the whole point of people becoming scientists, was because to them science proved the existence of God. So this modern, this newfangled notion of these modern scientists, where they think that no, science actually is the opposite. That actually tells you that they don't know jack shit about their own their own field. Because if anything, science proves the existence of a being that is beyond us, of a being that has made us, that has created us. If anything, science proves that nothing can just come into being on its own. There has to be something behind it. But there we are. I think that is what we call jahalat, That is the phenomena of having information and education, but not having an informed mind. So you're educated, you've got information, you've got all the expertise in your field, but you still can't get you still don't actually know anything. It's like you're an educated fool. You're an illiterate literate. Yeah, we have a word for it in our language where we call padhe likhe jahil, the educated illiterates, in other words, the educated fool. So you're educated on paper, but not mentally. That's what it means. And that is the problem with human beings today. Everybody's educated on paper, but not in their minds. Mentally, everybody is still completely uneducated. And that that lack of education, that lack of an actual having an actual informed mind, the lack of it is what has prompted us to deviate from everything that's natural and everything that's normal and everything that is supposed to be human. You know, I think the amount of sadism that or or having this a perverse mind is so rampant within us, and the fact that we have given into it thinking that, oh, that's normal, the fact that we have forgotten that what is normal is to resist to that which is bad and to resist temptations. And it is not normal to give in to your temptations, because that can lead to ultimate destruction, which we can see again. The temptations of the Western world leading to the destruction of the rest of the world. Look at Palestine, look at Kashmir, look everywhere around you. Look at how people are being disturbed. Who knew that the not so much that is needed to live life has become too difficult to acquire? Who knew? See, generally we say it doesn't really take much to live, right? So in life, actually, basically, we really don't need much. But who knew that even that would become impossible for us to have? This is how they have made life difficult for everybody around them, because of their greed, because of their temptations, because of their desires, because of their selfishness, because of their lack of consideration, because of their narcissism, because of their God complex. They have reduced the whole world to having even the basics taken away. Soon they will find a way to take away breathing from us as our rights. To already they're beginning to have this ridiculous debate every now and then about how water should not be a human right. Yeah, right. Water, air, natural sources of energy like the sun, these are things they're supposed to be everybody's right. Nobody is allowed to take these away, and yet human beings are finding different ways to monopolize on natural resources. What does that tell you about the human mind, if anything? And then when you see divine wrath, and then you try to give stupid, nonsensical reasons behind that just to prove that it's not divine wrath, that actually shows how stupid we are. Because, as I said, science just tells us how the wrath is taking place. It's just enabling us to visualize what exactly is going on. But that in no way diminishes the fact that it is indeed divine wrath, okay? That this is divine punishment, or it is a blessing, It just explains the actual act. It tells you how it is being done. It tells you what is happening behind the scenes, but that doesn't tell you why at the end of the day. It's not telling you the ultimate why, So that is why we say that religion and science, especially when we talk about Islam, we say Islam and science, they go hand in hand, because Islam tells you that, look, this thing happens, and then science is going to explain to you how this thing happens. And then Islam will tell you the different whys behind it, the different reasons behind it, And then again, science will move on to explain the various reasons applied. And this is how science does not negate the existence of divinity, but it just explains how things work to make it easy for us to understand. But yes, as I said, we ourselves can turn something that is a blessing into a curse just because we are corrupt, we are dishonest. Now, if Imran Khan wasn't ousted, he was actually making, and he had managed to make one or two, rain collection units. which is why there are certain areas where you will see that there are no flash floods, no matter how heavy the rain, and there is no actual, catastrophe that occurs anywhere near those places. But unfortunately, before he could even properly begin this whole project, he was ousted. So many of his projects that were literally fail-safe projects that were very simple, very cheap, long-lasting, commonsensical, they have been completely abandoned simply because this government is not here to do anything for us. This government is here to take everything from us. And there we are. This government is basically here to steal more, and as if there's anything else left to steal. But no, they've found something else to steal from us. If it's not gold, then it's precious stones. If it's not precious stones, then it's minerals. If it's not minerals, then it's rare earth metals. If it's not that, then they'll find something. There's always something, because unfortunately for us, Pakistan is extremely rich in resources. Extremely rich. And that is why nobody leaves us the frack alone. So personally, I think we're all welcoming the rains. And normally these rains, as I said, were just even a few decades ago, they would never have disturbed us. Now they are bringing more and more of their negative effects, simply because the amount of corruption throughout the decades has increased to this point where things are beginning to collapse. In other words, it's obvious when there's a consistency of something, but you have not done something to allow for the flow of it, then it will eventually affect you negatively, right? Eventually the pressure will come through. And it's like how you say that even you can even bore a dent into a rock just by constant pressure of water. This is how it works. When you constantly pressurize something for a long time, it has to give. Something has to give. That give is usually then in the form of a negative impact, where the infrastructure is concerned or where your population is concerned, because the one thing that the corrupt people, the one thing that they do best is take. So they don't know how to give. And as they take and take and take, the haves become the have-nots. And then the have-nots, they don't even they fall down even below the have-not category. So you can imagine which way the world is going right now, where soon it's going to be so difficult to even live. Because as we said, normally it takes nothing just to live, right? You don't need much to live. You can live very happily without much. But who knew that even that is now impossible to have? Who knew? And this is me signing out for the Hafiz.